my colleague Theodora Antwi, whom I'm going to introduce a little bit. So today, first of all, I want to appreciate everyone joining us. All our partners, participants who have registered. We had over 100 applicants for this section, and I believe it's because of the importance of the topic that we'll be treating today. The theme for the webinar today is mitigating the impact of COVID-19 on education in West Africa. This is interesting and absolutely important at a time like this. We have used various platforms to assess the impact of COVID on different areas of our lives since this unwanted guest came into our world, our region early this year. And we've looked at different perspectives. We've looked at the impact of COVID on our socio-cultural, socio-economic, political spaces, and particularly our health sector. It has done a big blow on our health sector. So today we'll be paying attention to the impact of COVID on education. A few data available to us that we have looked at says that over 700 million students are out of school, or were out of school, particularly during the lockdown. And on the continent specifically, we had over 40 countries that actually shut down every education, system, especially in the month of April. We cannot, stated the vulnerability of children generally, and of course our young girls who may have been, or who would have actually been, negatively impacted due to this lockdown of education system. Already we have children who were out of school, millions of them out of schools all over the world, even when the situations were normal. And when COVID introduced automatic, lockdown of every cities and towns, these children were even more vulnerable to, especially the young girls, they were more vulnerable to teenage pregnancies, sexual-based violence, and all sorts of violence against them. Of course, we also note that as Africa and the world at large continues to win the war against COVID, things are easing up across our countries, and quite a number of countries have started reopening our schools and various educational institutions. I recall a couple of weeks ago, the West African examination, WACSI as we call it, took place across our countries for all the senior final year senior high schools, and it was a tough one. So many parents and even so many governments contemplated the safety of students at that period. But of course, we had a few cases here and there in Ghana, in Nigeria, but we were able to pull through that. But the risks are still there. After all of this, it is important that we begin to ask ourselves, how do we move on from here? How do we regain the strength, or how do we rebuild the strength of our education system, which has been, severely battered by the impact of COVID-19? Just the way governments and other our various stakeholders are looking at how to rebuild the economy and how to rebuild the health sector. I think education is a sector that is important to every one of us, and that makes this conversation, highly critical. Today's section will be co-moderated by my colleague, Ms. Theodora Antwi, who is the manager of the Foundation for Security and Development in Africa, FOSDA. Foundation for Security and Development in Africa, FOSDA. Theodora, I'm going to invite you to tell us, a bit more about today's webinar, what we're going to be discussing, the goal, the objectives for all the participants who are currently on board to have a better idea of the importance of this kind of conversation. Theodora, if you are there, you have the floor now. Theodora, please check your microphone. Yes, we can hear you now.
You can hear me now? Great, great, great. So I'm here, I'm here, and I'm all excited that today has finally come and it's finally happening. We've been looking forward to having this conversation over the last few weeks, having all stakeholders across West Africa to have a chat and a discussion over the impacts of COVID-19 on education in West Africa. And also, like you said, Omo, looking forward, what are we going to do and how are we going to ensure that we build better systems? So we are very excited that today has come, and we are also very excited that a number of our stakeholders across West Africa are joining us. We are so excited, and like Omo said, my name is Theodora. I work with FOSDA, Foundation for Security and Development in Africa. So let me join Lara again to say welcome to everybody from across West Africa. We are so happy to have you to be part of all this conversation on education. And I am very, very sure that we've had this conversation in various places from different perspectives. But today we want to add a new perspective, like Omo has described. How do we move on from here? We are looking at what has happened and how we move on from here. How do we rebuild our systems in education and to make sure that they are more resilient, to make sure that the divides we have seen between the rich and the poor is no more happening going forward. How do we rebuild? And so we have gathered August stakeholders and panelists just to help us simulate our way and manipulate our way through this conversation to see how we move on from here. So our key objective is to get out of this webinar with key policy recommendations to policymakers such as ECOWAS, such as Unesco, such as all the governments across West Africa, key policy recommendations to our decision makers on how and what we are going to do to ensure that our education systems are resilient. We all know that most countries have not been able to fully reopen school since the pandemic. Why is that? Because COVID has exposed the kind of inequalities we have in our system and the kind of systematic challenges we have. And so we are looking forward. What do we do to ensure that come another pandemic or another mishap, we have a system that can withstand them and our children will be safe. And so Omo, this is basically why we are here. And we have, like you have said, this is being hosted and organized by a number of NGOs, CSOs across West Africa who are interested in youth development and also in education across the sub-region. So we have FOSDA, where I work. We have ANCEFA, that is a coalition of NGOs across Africa. We have NORSAC, we have YEFEL, we have Girls for Change in Liberia, and a number of other NGOs across the continent. I'm sure I'll remember their names and then share them as we go on. And then we have our key supporter, Oxfam. Oxfam is supporting all of these NGOs to work on education and youth development across the country. And we'll be hearing from them soon. Thank you, Omo.
All right. Thank you so much, Theodora. I mean, it's interesting to hear the number of, partners that have tried to put this together. I think it further shows the importance of a conversation like this. So without much ado, I would like to just introduce the high-level speakers, like as we call them, that we have prepared to be making intervention to today's conversation. In no particular order, please. I will start by introducing Mr. Mustafa Ndajuo. Mr. Mustafa is a global tax policy expert and the founder and executive director of the African Center for Tax and Governance. Please, if you are in the room, in this virtual room, thanks to COVID, kindly just wave your hand. You can put on your camera, your video, and you can just wave your hand so that people know that you are there. We'd like to see your face. Mr. Mustafa, if you're in the room, kindly just
Hello,
wave.
everyone.
All right.
Hello.
Mr. Mustafa. Hi. Thank you for joining us.
Nice to meet you.
The next person is Miss Cecile Sena Nutako. Cecile Sena Nutako, who is a technology entrepreneur, the founder and the CEO of Ecampus LLC. Mrs. Cyril, if you're there, Cecile, if you're there, can you just wave your hands for participants to see that you're there?
Yeah,
Cecile.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a Mr. My apologies, please. My apologies. Thank you so much for joining us. The next person is Pedi Anawi. Pedi Anawi is a teacher by profession, the regional coordinator for Education International African Region. Pedi, are you there? Can you say hi to us?
Hi, Theodora. Hi, everyone.
Oh, Pedi, hi. Nice to see you here, and thank you for joining us. And we also have Prosper Nyavo. Mr. Prosper is the head of education section of the Accra office of Unesco, representing the regional office. Prosper happens to be a very old friend and colleague of mine, a senior colleague actually. Prosper, are you here? I'd like to see your face again.
Yeah.
Hi, how you doing? Good to see you, Prosper. Thank you so much for joining this conversation. And we also have Sombi Isiaka. Sombi Isiaka is a researcher by profession and in charge of research and grants at the West Africa Health Organization, WAHO. Sombi, are you here? Sobi, if you're here, we'd like to hear, just, wave your hand and say hi to us. Okay. I think we're going to hear from Sobi. Maybe he's here to join. Another person who will be, intervening today is Rukia. Sobi, interesting. We can see you. Hi. Thank you for joining us.
Bonjour à vous.
Bonjour, comment tu vas? Okay, so the next person we have is Rukiatu Sego. Rukiatu Sego is a youth representative from Burkina Faso. Rukiatu, I saw you earlier. Can you just say hi to us? Rukiatu, are you there? Okay, I know she was here, so I'm sure she would say hi to us later. And last but not the least, we have our Deputy Minister today who will be giving the keynote speech. I just want to be sure is in. Regardless, I will go on and just read a very short profile of him. Dr. Yor Osei Adutum. Dr. Yor Osei Adutum is the Deputy Minister for Education of Ghana, and is a politician and a member of parliament for the Bosomtwe constituency in the Ashanti region. He is an educationist by profession and holds a PhD in educational policy and administration. He's also a former CEO of New Designs Educational Group, Los Angeles, California. I'm not sure if the Mr. Minister is in the room now. If you are in the room, please would like to acknowledge you. Theodora, can you confirm if the Deputy Minister is in the room, Dr. Yao?
Yes, I'm in the room.
Oh, good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Thank you so much for joining this conversation, and we're really, really happy to have you. I think it's important that we start with you being our keynote speakers for this August webinar. If you permit me, sir, I would like to invite you to give your keynote speech at this moment. Thank you so much. You have the floor.
How many minutes, please?
We can give you between 5 to 10 minutes. I know it's a lot.
Thank you,
sir.
Thank you so much for such a wonderful opportunity. I was asking about the time because you see, I'm a teacher and by profession, a politician, and in both professions, we have to talk to be paid. So invariably, we talk too much. And I had to be mindful of the fact that I have 5 to 10 minutes. I want to welcome every one of you to such a wonderful webinar, a webinar that is affording us the opportunity to look at our education system. I know we are talking about COVID-19 and the impact it has had on our education system, but pre-COVID, we had challenges. There's something called learning poverty. And the World Bank defined it as the fact that 53% of our children by age 10 could not read and understand a simple text. So we had a challenge before COVID-19. Then COVID-19 came and worsened the situation for us. But interestingly, our education is the most important thing that can change the fortunes of our countries. If we're going to talk about the transformation of West Africa and transformation on Africa, it's going to have to be through education. Various studies have been done. In the 21st century, you can make improvement in various sectors of your economy, but the research is showing that the impact will be minimal unless you are able to transform your education system to really meet the needs of that transformation agenda. So no longer should we be excited and interested about the fact that our students can pass the West Africa Examination Council exams, which invariably lend itself to memorization. When the questions are about why, when, how, we are not talking about critical thinking here. We have to look at the highest levels of the new Bloom's taxonomy, which is creation. And I always give the example that if I'm teaching pollution and I'm asking questions about why, the causes of pollution, and how do you avoid pollution, those are all important. It will help the children understand. If you really want to bring about transformation and help the children to obtain critical thinking skills, then you're going to ask them to talk about how they can create a city without pollution. The moment that question is posed, it means they will have to form groups. So now you are talking about collaboration. It means they have to think at the highest level of the Bloom's taxonomy, which is creation. And then they will have to also bring creativity to the fore. And of course, at the end, critical thinking will be enhanced. And that is how you get a critical minds with a critical mindset to help transform our countries. I always ask people, if the founder of Google was from Ghana, Ghana probably will no longer be a low middle income country, because the kind of revenues that will be coming to the country just through one company probably will transform our fortunes and will not be talking about poverty. So we are now in, and some will say at the cusp, others will say we're already in the 4th industrial revolution. The 4th industrial revolution, which is now talking about the physical and cyber connection, talking about driverless cars, talking about Internet of Things, and all the things that we are talking about now with artificial intelligence in the midst of it, is saying to us that if we don't revamp our education system, we will be left behind forever. And there'll be frustration everywhere. And that frustration that will occur will also be a source of instability in our various nations. So we are now being called upon, and I think COVID-19 is creating a greater sense of urgency for us, that we need to take a look at our education system and understand that for the most part, it was not fit for purpose, even before COVID-19. COVID-19 made it worse because the digital divide manifested itself, and then those who had no access to the digital technologies that will allow them to continue to learn were simply left behind. So it exposed that, yes, not just our education system, but our society as a whole, that there was a vast majority of our people without access to the needed technology to have access to the content that will enable them to even compete with us within our own countries and with the rest of the world. So yes, we are now hopefully getting out of COVID-19 for the most part. Our various nations are coming out, but the bottom line is, where do we go from here? what has COVID taught us that we can actually learn from and begin to look at how do we create a robust education system. If there was anything positive COVID has taught us, in Ghana, for example, our universities was able to all go online, something that we never thought could happen in this country. They all went online and did some very good quality teaching and learning. And what we learn from that is what is going to help us do some beautiful things and as a result of the experience that we gained from COVID. On the negative side of things, we also know that so many children have lost out on learning. And as a result, we have to do a catching up. We were behind, now we have to lift ourselves by our bootstraps. But we're not going to be able to do this without looking at the concept of leapfrogging. You know, Brookings Institution recently did a study authored by Rebecca Winthrop. That said that for developing nations to catch up in terms of education with developed nations, developing with developed nations, it was going to take us about 126 years. As if they will be waiting for us. They are not going to be waiting for us to catch up with them in 126 years. But the good news is that they also said something, that countries that will catch up are the ones who leapfrog inequality. Leapfrogging inequality means in terms of access, in terms of quality, in terms of relevance, we have to look at what we have been doing and really begin to look at how do we change? What kind of paradigm is going to help us change? And I'll give you an example in Ghana. 3 years ago, the new government under Nana Akufo-Addo decided that Ghanaian youth can no longer wait and be out of school after junior high school because they didn't have the money to pay for secondary education. So we brought online what is called free senior high school, which meant we needed to educate 1.2 million students instead of 800,000 who are in the high school system. How do we create space for 400,000 more students? Then took us on what I call a hunting expedition, and we're able to come up with a system that is in America, it's called year-round schools. In Ghana, we call it double track. We're able to divide the entire student population of every senior high school into 3 cohorts. At every point in time, 2 of them are in school, 1 is on vacation, and then we're able to rotate in such a way that all the students have access to quality teaching and learning. In fact, we're able to even increase the contact hours from 1,080 hours a year to 1,134 because we made the school day longer. So this was a leapfrogging strategy that has enabled Ghana to educate 400,000 more youth in our senior high schools. And after removing the cost barrier, we're able to create more space in our senior high schools through this leapfrogging strategy. So if we're able to do that in 3 years, look at what is going to happen to us 20 years from now. There's a village in my constituency where I'm the member of parliament. In a good year, only about 2 students are graduated from high school because after junior high school, they didn't have money to move on to senior high school, even though it's subsidized by the government. Now this year, 50 students graduated high school from that village. And the next year, more students are coming. Within a short period of time, the fortunes of that village is going to change. And if we take a look at the gross tertiary enrollment ratio of that village, the numbers are going to go way up and be comparable to other countries around the world in terms of gross tertiary enrollment ratio. And by the way, one of the most critical factors for measuring the impact of tertiary education on socioeconomic transformation is gross tertiary enrollment ratio. South Korea in 1960, Ghana was actually richer than them. Our per capita income was $189. South Korea was $158. But recently, South Koreans came to Ghana and they were going to give us a loan. We had a wonderful meeting where they asked us, in 1960, you guys were richer than us. How do we become richer than you at this point? Of course, it was a day of shame for me as a Ghanaian. I was sitting there for somebody to come from their country and tell me or ask me, how did I become better than you? Of course, they were quick to point out, hey, we are not smarter than you, but we are just asking a question. Of course, we got it. And they showed us 3 graphs. The first was Ghana, South Korea, 1960 per capita income. Of course, we are ahead of them. And they showed us now, way ahead of us. We can't even compare. And then they asked us, why do you guys think we became better than you? Why did we went ahead of you, even though in 1960 you were better than us. And after a short discussion, they said, okay, let's look at the third graph. And the third graph was the gross tertiary enrollment ratio of Ghana and South Korea. Gross tertiary enrollment ratio measured by the youth population 18 to 23. If you take any of our youth between 18 to 23 in any country, out of 100, how many of them have some kind of tertiary education? In South Korea, that measure gave them 93.6%, and Ghana at that time was 16.19. Now we are 17%. So go figure, 17%, 94. And they just said, you know what? When we became independent, we went on industrialization track just like you. In 1960, we focused on making sure that our education system was relevant to our needs. TVET and other things were promoted. The vast majority of our youth has access to secondary and then tertiary, and that tells you about our success story in simple and plain terms. And of course, they were here to give us a loan, and they've given us the loan to build the university. They said, we want to help you to build more universities because your gross tertiary enrollment ratio will be a very good indicator as to where you are going to be. The future of Africa is now in our hands. We decide whether we compete globally. We decide whether we are going to open the floodgates of access to education at all levels to all our youth, irrespective of their socio-economic circumstances. We have to create a sense of urgency and ensure that our people are having access to quality education. Because you see, you can do access very well, open the floodgates of education to the vast majority of your people. But if you don't focus on the quality of the education system, the output, the outcome that is coming out of it, you are not going to get the impact that education can make. Before becoming the Deputy Minister of Education, I was privileged enough to have lived in America where I helped building schools. And there's some things that I learned from there in terms of what they do to transform their system. Their situation may be difficult for them, but Americans will put everything on the table. Even if things are tough, they get to a point where all of them come together, rally behind their leader, and then do big things. So when Americans decided that their public schools were not working, and they were going to create public-private partnership type of schools, they created them, charter schools, and those are the schools I developed in America. And the whole idea was, how do we improve the quality of teaching and learning? So everything was on the table, and I was able, sitting as African, build schools in the US that changed the quality of the learning outcomes in the communities that I operated in. I'm saying this to emphasize that as Africans, we cannot always look at the fact that this has been the norm. This has been the way we have done business, and we have to continue that way. That kind of thinking is not actually going to help us leapfrog inequality. So when it comes to quality in Ghana, for example, our teacher education program was 2 years plus 1 year teaching practice. We've changed it to 4 years, just like any other country, so that we can produce quality teachers. So the bottom line for us as Africans is that in order for us to create a resilient education system, we need to improve our economy, bottom line. But we cannot improve our economy without also changing the education system. So if you are not careful, it will be a conundrum. Somebody will say, you want me to produce all this science laboratories. Where am I going to get the money from? That is where you look for leapfrogging strategies. So you look at, instead of creating wet science labs with water flowing, begin to look at simulated science labs, or what is called virtual labs. Less expensive to create, and will still give you very good learning outcomes. We are doing that in Ghana. Virtual lab activities are being created for schools that are deprived and don't have what we call the wet labs, so that they can all participate in scientific exploration and activities. All that I'm saying is this: we have a great opportunity to do something profound. And let us not look at our limiting circumstances, but let's look at the fact that we can leapfrog at the access level, at quality level, and at the relevance level. You know, I'm a politician and a teacher, and I don't want to talk too much to bore you, but I just want to encourage you and to let you know that we have a great opportunity post-COVID. We have a sense of urgency. Let's work together and transform our education system so that it will be fit for purpose and can do the transformation work that we all need to do so badly. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, sir, for this insightful opening remarks. And I mean, we all got the message that you tried to relate in your speech. And I believe we are going to act on it. In the course of this conversation, we will be soliciting for input and intervention, both from our speakers and participants, on what relevant policies and action steps that our government and key stakeholders should be taking to work around the accessibility, the quality, the relevance of education in West Africa, and of course, indeed, across the continent. Thank you so much once again, Dr. Yaa Osei Adutum, the current Deputy Minister for Education of Ghana. He's a politician, like he says. He's a member of parliament for the Bosumtoi constituency in the Ashanti region. He's an educationist and holds a PhD in educational policy and administration. This is for colleagues just joining us before my earlier introduction of him. Thank you once again, Mr. Deputy Minister, for this insightful word. At this moment, I would like to invite my co-moderator, Theodora, to now introduce our key partners for this webinar, and so they can give their remarks as well. Theodora, please go ahead and introduce our partners. Theodora, are you there? Please check your mic in case you're speaking. Your mic is on mute, Theodora.
Hello, Laura, I think we have a problem with Theodora's connection.
With Theodora, okay, all right. Thank you so much. So let me use this opportunity to invite Oxfam, represented by, just let me pull up the name very quickly. We have our colleague from Oxfam who will be giving us remarks from them. Okay, my able senior colleague, Mr. Zakaria Sulemana. Zakaria Sulemana is the Regional Education Advisor for Oxfam West Africa, Zach, as we fondly call him. You have the floor now, Zach. Good to see you again.
Thank you very much, Omorora, and thanks to everyone. At the risk of repeating what has already been said, my opening remarks is being made on behalf of all the organizers who have been mentioned to you: Foundation for Security and Development in Africa, FOSDA, Africa Network Campaign on Education for All, ANCEFA, West Africa Civil Society Institute, and of course on our own behalf as Oxfam. The point need not be said, or it will be an overemphasis to say that COVID-19 brought in its wake the greatest disruption to education in history. Most governments in West Africa closed schools as part of measures to contain the spread of the pandemic. Now, many West African countries have started lifting containment measures and reopening schools and other educational institutions. Eventually, it is our hope that all schools will reopen for students at all levels. As we progress in this reopening of schools, there are a number of concerns that need attention. Of major concern to governments and all education stakeholders are the health, safety, and well-being of our populations, especially pupils, teachers, and all those directly or indirectly involved in the provision of education services. The adequacy of attention paid to these concerns will determine how well schools reopen and how well learning becomes, or how effective learning becomes when schools reopen. During the COVID and during the school closures, technology proved to be helpful in sustaining learning. It does also have the potential to be a complementary strategy to reopening schools and forging effective learning for all learners. We note, however, that the majority of the poor in particular could not take advantage of the lessons delivered through e-learning platforms. That fear is still there even when schools reopen. So we are concerned that when schools reopen, we will need to pay attention to the access to digital platforms, affordability of digital platforms, et cetera, in order to ensure that all learners have access to this. The other area of concern to us as a group is that schooling in some countries in the sub-region, especially those in the Sahel, was under arrest due to the activities of extremist groups and then violent activities. COVID-19 has only come to worsen the plight of children found under these circumstances. Already, the UN estimates that there are 97 million out-of-school children in sub-Saharan Africa, the majority of whom are girls. Due to COVID, the numbers of out-of-school children, especially girls, will increase significantly so. The UN estimates that 11 million children are at risk of not returning to school, and 5.2 of these are girls. But the figure for Africa is estimated by World Vision International to be 1 million girls who will not return to school due mainly to pregnancy. This is a major concern as we make efforts to reopen school. But perhaps the biggest concern is the devastating crisis in public financing of our education systems. Again, here, UN has some global figures to help us. That at least $210 billion will be cut from education budgets in 2021, simply due to declines in gross domestic product. And also there's going to be pressure to reallocate scarce resources to health and safety nets. This is quite obvious, but needs to be taken care of. And it might result in a further 5% cut from education budgets, amounting to something in the region of 337 billion globally. And we in West Africa are not out of this. As we know, our education systems were historically already underfunded, and COVID is only coming to worsen this. Ladies and gentlemen, before COVID, we faced huge inequalities in education. Millions of girls, children from poor and deprived families, refugees, as I already indicated, were not enjoying their rights to quality education. COVID will deepen these inequalities in education and thwart the efforts of our governments in the sub-region to achieve SDG 4 and also SDG 10 and others. This is where our biggest concern lies. And this is the reason why this webinar is organized, to search for workable policy propositions that will help our governments to take bold and urgent action to prevent the health crisis. COVID is supposed to be a health crisis, but it has a very big potential of triggering an education calamity that could affect the life prospects of a whole generation of children. So we are very happy that we have all these speakers, including the Honorable Deputy Minister of Education. We are convinced that we have assembled personalities with the right expertise and experiences to help us throw more light on the health, well-being, safety, gender, refugee financing, and other relevant concerns imposed on us by COVID. And two, to make policy recommendations to build back better, as they say these days, but also build resilient education systems with sustainable financing to withstand future such pandemics. And I am confident that at the end of the day, the group of expertise and then the Q&A that will follow will give us the necessary recommendations for us to transform this into a call for action on ECOWAS, our governments, and all intergovernmental organizations, as well as donors who are interested in education. And we will circulate this to everybody. I thank you once again on behalf of all the organizers for accepting to speak and accepting to participate. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Zach. So we have, indeed to get to do our normal thing like we normally do in a physical room. So we tend to clap for, speakers even virtually. Thank you so much, sir. Those are insightful call to actions that you already made in your speech. I think before we go into, listening to our speakers, I would also like to call on ECOWAS to give 2-3 minutes of remarks from their end. We do recognize ECOWAS as the regional economic body for West Africa, and we do acknowledge the role they have been playing across various thematic issues affecting the lives of an average community citizen. So to speak on behalf of ECOWAS Education, Scientific and Cultural Department, Mrs. Aisha Usman. She's a program officer, education of the ECOWAS ESC. Mrs. Aisha, are you there? Please, you have 3 minutes.
Yes, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Claire.
Oh, my greetings to all of us who are over here. Honorable Minister, we appreciate your presence and also your very insightful opening remarks. I believe it will ginger all of us in the right direction. Having said that, I'm sorry you cannot see my video. I have a challenge on that, but if the audio is okay by you, I will go ahead.
I'm mindful of that, but I don't think he's going to take it.
I'm sorry. Hello?
Yes, Ms. Aisha, we can hear you. Please go on.
Yes, please. So on behalf of the ECOWAS education team, the Honorable Commissioner, Professor Leopoldo Amado, the Director, Professor Abdullahi Maga, and the rest of the team, I'm yours sincerely, Aisha Usman. So I've been mandated to give our brief comment, which starts with our own appreciation and commendation to FOSDA and the other partners, such as Oxfam and ANCEFA, for the good works you are doing in all our member states. We highly appreciate, and we are really happy to be on board with you people on this laudable initiative. We believe that this your current initiative vis-a-vis the effects of the COVID in all the member states of ECOWAS will really help the authorities with their ongoing efforts to mitigate the efforts of the pandemic on the education systems. We also believe that your noble action on this webinar, the conclusion of which we believe will complement the ongoing efforts that individual member states are making. ECOWAS as a regional body, also our own coordination and activities we are doing with other partners. We believe this effort will support one another in order to provide a better way on both the theoretical lessons, the tutorials, the practical work, and the final examination at different levels, and to minimize the risk of students dropping out of school during these trying times. So on this note, the ECOWAS education sector is really proud and happy to be associated with you and the good works you are doing. We hope that our collective efforts will guarantee the right access to quality education in all ramifications and at all the levels of the education, even in emergency situations. In conclusion, we are very much have been mandated to say that the education sector will really look forward to the conclusion and the recommendation of this webinar, and however is possible for us to see that action points are being taken out accordingly. We are solidly behind. We'll do our best. We appreciate you all. Thank you very much, and I wish us a successful deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mrs. Aisha, who is with the ECOWAS Education, Scientific and Cultural Department. Thank you for this message from the Honorable Commissioner himself. I think we have really set the ground and it's time for us to move into listening to our speakers of the day. And to commence the speaking section of this webinar is, again, my very good senior colleague, Prosper Inyavo, who is the head of education section for Unesco office in Accra. Prosper, you're going to be starting this section for us. I mean, many schools or many countries have decided to open up thanks to our winning of this COVID, the pandemic war. How safe is it to reopen school, and what are some of the sustainable recovery that you think we should be putting in place to regain the time that we have lost? I mean, by and large, schools have been affected for about 6 months to 7 months actually. Prosper, you have 5 minutes to give us your insight. You have the floor now.
Thank you, Umubi, and good to see you. Thanks to my bosses, Honorable Minister, I was with him a few minutes ago, and to my boss, Zach, which I only meet him at a forum like this. Yeah, as you mentioned, a lot has been lost by students. In Ghana, students have been home since March, and there's a need for something to be done when they get back to school, so that they can make up for the lost time. But actually, the children are not just sitting at home, they are learning. We all agree that there is a gap, there is inequality, which existed before COVID, so they are not going back as empty barrels anyway. Some are even learning more than they were in school. They have acquired new skills, how to use digital solutions. So they are not just going back being worse off. Those who are worse off, we know them already. Zach has mentioned them. Those who are from the poorer home, those who are living in hard to reach areas with no access to the online resources. But in Ghana, television programs are ongoing, radio programs are ongoing. So UNESCO has actually monitored throughout the sub-region. A lot is happening in terms of alternative sources of learning for children. And we have a database of what is going on in all countries. And I can tell you that the sub-region is not doing badly in terms of creating opportunity for children to learn. They are using radio, television, and online sources. But due to the divide, definitely there's a need for a catch-up mechanism when they get back to school. So for us at UNESCO, we have actually issued a document which we call UNESCO issue notes, which I can share with you maybe after the webinar to share with your participants. We are recommending that there should be an assessment of the learning loss during the school closures. It's something that we are urging our member states to do. We should assess what has been lost and how do we make up for it. The assessment will give us indication of what kind of mechanism we should put in place. Otherwise, we will just go around doing a lot of remedial classes, which might even compound the case. The children are already stressed sitting at home. So if we assess, we are able to identify the gaps and know what kind of catch-up or measures to put in place. We are also saying there should be a special focus on vulnerable groups like girls. We know during this period, a lot of girls have issues with gender-based violence. A lot of girls are actually getting pregnant. I know some organizations in Ghana are even doing a study as we speak now to find out the extent to which COVID has made the girls more vulnerable and how it has impacted on pregnancy cases among young people. So we believe this is something that has to be done and a special measures put in place for these vulnerable groups like girls and persons with disability. You will notice that a lot of the online programs and television lessons that are being held in all the countries, they are not targeting persons with disability, those with hearing impairment, those with visual impairment. We need to think about how we help these groups, the blind, the dumb, and all, so that they can catch up quickly with the rest. Then also, we believe that there should be a blended approach when the schools resume. Definitely, technology should be part of the system as we go forward now. Not just because of COVID, the benefits are so enormous. We believe the member states have to, as a matter of urgency, build capacity for teachers. In Ghana, since the closure of schools, majority of the teachers have been idling. They are not playing any active role. We believe if we build capacity of teachers on the use of online solutions, they can contribute effectively, and especially when schools reopen, they can use technology to bridge the learning loss that we have experienced. And we are also recommending the need for multi-sectorial collaboration. We noticed that with schools reopening, issues of water and sanitation is going to be key. And this is why we need the ministries of education and water resources, whatever name is being used for the various countries. And even the Ministry of Communication, now schools need data. A lot of schools now have online sources with solutions. How do they power them? As I mentioned, the cost of this data. It's not going to be easy. I foresee a lot of rush by countries to put in place infrastructure, IT infrastructure, but we should also think about the cost. Otherwise, you put a facility there, but it will not be accessible to the poor and the vulnerable. So one of the things we think is urgent, apart from the water and sanitation issues that should be put in place, is capacity for teachers to be able to contribute effectively to learning experience when schools reopen. We expect the teachers to come back with new skills. The teaching methodologies should change. It's not going to change overnight, but this is the time. This is the time the teachers are sitting at home. Governments have to take advantage of this period to train them, give them the skills so that by the time schools reopen fully, they would have gone back with new skills to even make learning more exciting. So this is what I can say for now. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Prosper. And you have said a lot. I actually took particular notes of the recommendations, which is what I will be, asking everyone to also consider in their speeches. Thank you so much for relating to us the interventions of UNESCO thus far and some of the success stories that you have been able to share with us, and then looking forward, the things that we should be considering: multi-sectoral collaborations, you know, ministry, different ministries contributing to this process, and also building the capacity of teachers with new skills, new platforms that could, you know, enhance the teaching after school resumes back. Thank you so much. I mean, this is really interesting. Let me invite, you know, a youth, as they have put here. Rukiatu Sego is a youth representative from Burkina Faso. Rukiatu, can you tell us in 5 minutes how you think COVID has impacted the education system in Burkina Faso? What has been your experiences, and you know, just share with us what are the gaps and how do you think Burkina Faso and the various stakeholders should respond to a post-COVID education system. Rukiatu, if you are there, please, you have the floor now. You have 5 minutes. Rukiatu.
Bonjour, je suis là. Je ne sais pas si vous m'entendez. OK. Donc, comme on l'a, tout le monde l'a dit, d'accord. Comme le disaient donc les premiers orateurs, la COVID-19 a touché vraiment le secteur de l'éducation. Donc, au Burkina Faso, nous avons vraiment eu la fermeture des établissements dès les premiers cas de COVID, de signes. Donc, depuis mars 2020, il y a beaucoup d'établissements qui ont fermé. Et cela a touché durablement l'éducation parce que, il faut le dire, notre système éducatif était vraiment défaillant depuis quelques années. Donc, il y a une faiblesse qui va être constatée parce que les mesures restrictives adoptées ont fragilisé encore plus le système qui, avec la fermeture des établissements scolaires et universitaires, donc, beaucoup d'élèves et d'étudiants sont retournés à la maison. Il n'y avait pas de cours, il y avait aucune possibilité pour reprendre les classes parce qu'on n'a pas vraiment mis en place un système qui va permettre à ce que les étudiants ou les élèves puissent suivre les cours en ligne ou bien à distance. Donc, il y a vraiment eu un arrêt systématique, un arrêt complet plutôt de l'éducation. Il n'y a pas d'Internet dans certaines zones, donc il n'y avait pas... certains établissements qui voulaient faire le e-learning n'ont pas pu le faire. Il y a eu le gouvernement a mis en place des cours à distance à la télévision, mais il faut dire également qu'à ce niveau-là, c'était vraiment compliqué parce que il y a beaucoup qui sont dans les régions qui n'ont pas accès à la télé, qui n'ont pas d'électricité. Donc, c'est vraiment compliqué pour ces personnes-là de suivre les cours. Et il faut également ajouter que avec l'arrêt des cours, beaucoup sont retournés en campagne, beaucoup sont retournés dans les villages pour pouvoir reprendre les activités génératrices de revenus, c'est-à-dire l'agriculture, c'est-à-dire l'élevage, reparti dans les champs, reparti également en brousse pour surveiller les animaux. Donc, ces personnes-là, c'était vraiment compliqué de les faire s'asseoir pour suivre les cours qui se déroulaient souvent à midi, pour suivre des cours ou bien même de comprendre les cours parce qu'il n'y a pas quelqu'un qui était à côté pour mieux expliquer. Quand, par exemple, on vous dit de suivre, par exemple, les cours de géométrie ou bien d'arithmétique, de calcul, de mathématiques, etc. Ce sont des cours où il faut vraiment avoir quelqu'un à côté pour mieux expliquer avec des figures et tout. Donc, il n'y a pas eu de suivi, il n'y a pas il n'y a pas vraiment ce suivi-là qui a permis à ce que les élèves puissent comprendre. Donc, c'était vraiment jusqu'à présent, il y a beaucoup qui sont en retard. Et c'est vrai que les cours ont repris et qu'on a autorisé à ce que pendant 45 jours, on puisse revenir au programme de l'année passée pour pouvoir le terminer. Mais c'est vraiment compliqué de le mettre de le finir parce que les élèves n'ont pas eu l'esprit en ébullition. L'esprit n'était pas en travail, donc c'était vraiment compliqué pour eux de pouvoir reprendre les cours. On voit les efforts des anciens, mais c'est vraiment très compliqué. Donc, moi, ce que je proposerais pour le gouvernement, parce que cette crise, cette pandémie a vraiment mis à mal le système éducatif. Donc, pour moi, je pense, et tous les jeunes sont d'accord avec moi, je pense également qu'il faut repenser l'éducation dans tous les pays de l'Afrique de l'Ouest. Il faut vraiment promouvoir l'usage du numérique dans le secteur éducatif, c'est-à-dire faire en sorte qu'on puisse intégrer les nouvelles technologies de l'information et de la communication pour que si jamais, on ne le souhaite pas, mais si jamais on a à revivre une situation pareille, que les élèves puissent suivre les cours normalement, continuer les cours normalement, avec des évaluations à distance qui vont leur permettre de suivre le cursus normal, d'être à jour au niveau du système, au niveau de l'école, au niveau des curricula qui sont dispensés. Donc, il faut donc également permettre à ce qu'une chaîne éducative multimédia puisse être fonctionnelle sur tout le territoire national, que ce soit au Burkina, en Côte d'Ivoire ou un peu partout dans les pays de la CEDEAO, qu'il faut vraiment faire en sorte qu'en dehors de l'école, ils puissent avoir quelque chose que les élèves puissent faire. Donc, moi, je pense que, par exemple, les bibliothèques numériques peuvent être mises en œuvre pour permettre à ce que, si on a envie de consulter un livre, qu'on n'a pas accès à l'école, qu'on puisse le faire avec les parents qui sont là pour mieux surveiller. Donc, il faut également, comme je l'ai dit, repenser, reformer complètement le système éducatif dans toute l'Afrique. Sinon, on ne veut pas vraiment finir à la traîne parce qu'actuellement, on a vu que les pays qui étaient plus en avance en matière de numérique, en matière de technologie, de l'information, de la communication, ont vraiment poursuivi le cursus normal. Si je prends le cas du Rwanda, qui est un exemple à la matière, qui a vraiment mis en œuvre cette réforme-là et qui a permis à ce que les élèves et les étudiants puissent suivre les cours. Je pense qu'il est vraiment nécessaire que nos pays également adoptent ce système-là. Ça fait longtemps qu'on dit que les curricula ne sont plus adaptés, il faut reformer le système éducatif, il faut vraiment envoyer d'autres choses pour qu'on puisse suivre les cours, mais ce n'est pas faisable. Donc, je pense que le mieux actuellement, c'est qu'on reforme complètement le système éducatif, qu'on fasse en sorte que les nouvelles technologies de l'information, et j'insiste vraiment sur ça, parce que c'est ce qui va définir demain la qualité de l'éducation, de notre éducation, de l'éducation de nos petits frères et petites sœurs, pour qu'ils puissent être compétitifs sur le marché. Imaginez que demain, on puisse être demandé à ce qu'il y ait sur le plan mondial une compétition et que nous, on ne peut pas y prendre part parce que nous, on a eu un arrêt des cours qu'on n'a pas pu terminer notre programme de cette année. C'est un retard, c'est un grand retard que nous, on a. Donc, je demande vraiment à ce qu'on reforme le système éducatif et qu'on fasse en tout cas en sorte que demain ou après-demain, je parle bien sûr comme ça, mais pour dire que l'année prochaine, par exemple, qu'on puisse démarrer la nouvelle année scolaire avec toutes ces réformes-là pour permettre à ce que les enfants puissent être à jour au niveau de l'école. Je pense que c'est ce que j'avais à dire. Je ne sais pas si tout le monde m'a entendu.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ricky. Yeah, thank you so much, Rikiato. I think your points were not only made, they were, straight home. You have been able to address a number of issues that affect every one of us. And, somewhat building on the points that Prosper raised, and just taking keywords from you is calling for a total, reform of our educational system and also prioritizing technology as part of our educational truth, because this is where the world is going. In fact, we knew technology was the future of the world. What we didn't know is that the future was going to come in 2020, and you have been able to really, highlight those points. The need for us to integrate digital tools into our education, systems, and of course for us to learn from other countries like Rwanda. And you also was able to share with us how every effort, or at least most of the efforts that government puts in place in Burkina Faso had been met with different other challenges as the case may be, based on TV, there is no light, online teachings, there is no internet, and where there is, it's unaffordable, it's expensive, and all of this kind of excluded a number of, pupils from continuing with their education. Thank you so much for sharing those insights with us from Burkina Faso. The next person on the agenda is really, I love the way this agenda is being put together. So we're going to be listening to Mr. Cecil Sena Notakako, who is the founder and CEO of Ecampus. He will be talking to us about e-learning in deprived in deprived West Africa. I mean, the first two speakers had talked about the role that technology has played in places where there is, and how it has also affected or excluded others in places where they are technologically, challenged or deprived. Mr. Cecile, can you share with us, what does this mean? We do understand that technology penetration on our continent generally is way lower than we have in the West, in Asia, or even in the Middle East. What does this mean to us in West Africa? And what do you see for the future? What should we be doing? What should policymakers be doing? And I'm very happy that we still have Mr. Deputy Minister still on the call, representing, I believe, all West African policymakers today. So, sir, please don't go. Please stay with us. Cecile, you have the floor now. 5 minutes, please. Cecile, okay. Are you there? Okay.
Yeah, I'm here. Okay, good afternoon. And I think the Honorable Deputy Minister made some interesting points. And I think Prosper also added quite a few dimensions. I know Prosper. We've met on a number of occasions, I think, during the International Youth Day. So I know how passionate he is about these issues. And I think our youth from Burkina, I think she exposes like the real challenges that are on the ground. From where I sit, I've been working in e-learning since 2003. And one of the challenges I think we had that made COVID took the education sector by surprise was that, that doubting Thomas attitude we had towards e-learning. I'm talking from my experiences from 2003 when we were championing the integration of technology into our educational system. We kept telling ourselves, oh, we are not ready yet, or we are not ready yet, we don't have the infrastructure. And we just more or less unintentionally ignored that important aspect of being a transformational society. We are quick to buy the new expensive iPhones and Android phones, but we underutilize them to less than 2%, and we feel we are not ready yet. That mentality, I think, is what is coming back to hurt us now. Because I do believe that if we had taken some steps as far back as 2003, where in Ghana, the ICT for Accelerated Development Policy was being rolled out, there were elements where we were tasked as a nation to introduce technology into our classrooms. And it's sad to say in implementing some of those things, some of the boxes that were checked that they've introduced technology was the use of projectors in our classroom. That's too minor. That's too minor. When a policy direction is saying, consider the integration of technology into your classroom as far back 2003, 2004, and introducing projectors into the classroom was celebrated as introducing technology into the classroom. That was a big blow to some of us. And I can understand that, yeah, people didn't fully understand these things. But I would want to make some suggestions. Yes, I know I've started this way so we can all feel sorry for ourselves and act boldly going forward. Now, one of the suggestions I want to give is, if you look at how telecommunication has gradually penetrated rural West Africa, that was a systematic approach, gradual approach, collaboration. At the point in Ghana, the Ministry of Communication had to force telecom companies to start sharing the same marks because each person was building their own, which was limiting penetration. Now there's interpretability, there's so much, and the telecom sector even controls more cash flows or money than the banking system currently, right? Because they were able to bring everybody on board with the financial inclusion and all of that. That's another model we could use to take technology penetration for education to the rural areas. Why can't we run on those infrastructure? Why can't we make it an integral part, right? The National Communications Authority, who regulates these bodies. Why can't we do that? There are more SIM cards than Ghanaians. So if we have such infrastructure, see the SIM card as a microchip, we could ride on that technology and reach every single person with the education they need in terms of infrastructure. If it means that we need to maybe give them some tax breaks, if it means that we need to introduce some policies and let them drive this agenda, let them drive it. They care about education too. At the peak of COVID, all of them, MTN, Vodafone, Selfline, Busy, they made our e-learning platform, Ecampus, 0 rated so that the kids didn't have to use data to assess learning. They are willing to do something. Now, going forward, we're looking at how do we work with them so that we can make this sustainable and then it can pay for itself. So at the NCA level, government level, policy level, we can work with these people and get the data or the bandwidth that is required to give access to the people in those areas. So that's the first thing. I know government through Ghana, through GIFEC, Ghana Investment Fund for Electronic Communication, has policies like that to try and get rural connectivity moving. But I feel if we involve the telecom sector, let them drive it, we will move faster. Number 2, now when COVID hit globally, this is not only, Africa is not only the only guilty one here. When COVID hit globally, there was a huge content gap. There was a huge digital content gap. Most of the content that was available were not interactive. They were just basic PowerPoints, PDFs, which were not engaging enough to get the attention and then the focus or the interest or the enthusiasm of learners. So that's one great problem. Production of content can be expensive, but we can get it done less expensive if we involve the teachers. So the idea of getting teachers to start transforming their content from the basic PowerPoint or PDF or Word document into something very basic interactivity, simple illustrations, very simple 2D animations, very simple maybe 2D interactive, content that would make it more engaging for the youth. There are several tools that can be used to train these teachers to get that done. So from experience, at the peak of COVID, when we started getting a lot of demand, a lot of people were coming to our sites to have access to content. One of the complaints we were getting was we don't have enough video and interactive content. Because prior to that, we were very careful on how to invest into content because it was a bit expensive. So we're only producing those interactive content for subjects and topics that had high demand. So we could recover the revenue, use it to produce more. But when COVID hit, we were getting demand from nursing, midwifery, NVTI, all over the place. And there was no way we could produce that overnight. So what we did was to engage the teachers because now they were also home. They needed some side jobs, they needed some side hustles, and we took them through basic trainings. And as I speak, we have about 10 to 20 teachers who can use basic tools to create basic 2D and basic 3D interactive content that is very engaging and can help students, spend time consuming content. From research, most people pay attention to videos and interactive content that they will pay attention to just reading text. So that's another content, the second thing, the content side. The final thing I would like to get across would be we don't have data on what is working and what is not working. By that, I mean, if you take 20 students from Honorable Minister's constituency, if we take 20 students, can we tell how many of them are doing well in a topic like vectors under mathematics? And can we tell how many of them are struggling on a topic like photosynthesis under integrated science? Can we tell on a dashboard? Do we have that as a nation? We don't. And that's very critical to be able to create adaptive learning environments, personalized learning environments, group people, match learners to teachers with the right strengths and weaknesses so that we can facilitate a more direct, intentional learning environment, right? So that's very important. How do we measure those things so that the things like passing WAEC will not be the epitome of the success of education? No, like the Honorable Minister said, if I can take a group of students from every constituency and tell you the topics, the subtopics, the subjects, their strengths and weaknesses are, and we can see a trend and look at what reforms can be done to help. How should we change our teacher training to produce teachers that can help in those weaknesses? How do we equip the teachers well so that we are not just assuming things because you work in South Korea, so maybe it work in Ghana? No, we need to have that hard data and we can gather that. So those are my 3 takeaways I would like to share. Thank you for attention.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate your insight. And I mean, I can feel the passion with which you're talking, especially because you are some of the messiahs that we had in the past that kept pointing us in that direction. But it seems like we lost those opportunities, but it's better late than never, like they say. Now COVID has, you know, gotten all of us on our toes, and now we're trying to, you know, to run when we ought to have taken baby steps in previous years. Thank you so much for those insights. Let me invite Theodora to take over from here to introduce the next speakers. Theodora, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. My video is off to give me a better connection, but I think we are enjoying ourselves so much. And like you said, the conversation is just connecting one after the other to each other, and it's getting very nice. But now we've heard from Cecil, we've heard the need for technology, we've heard from Rakia too, and then we are asking ourselves, how are we getting the money to do all this? How are we getting the money to get the technology, the content that Cecil spoke about? And so we have Mr. Mustafa Indejiwa with us. He's a tax expert, and then he's the CEO of the Africa Center for Tax and Governance. We intentionally looked for him and invited him for this meeting because after all the proposals, the question is how? Where is the money coming from? And like we've heard, he knows where the money is. Mustafa knows where the money is and is going to lead us right to where the money is. So Mustafa, are you on? The floor is yours now. Tell us where the money is. How are we going to finance this?
I'm here, thank you very much. Let me just share my screen. 1 second. Oh, so could you kindly allow me share screen? Permission to share the screen?
Yes, please, you can share screen now, Mustafa.
Okay. One second. Okay, so yes, thank you very much. I'm really honored to be here. It's been interesting hearing all the conversations about education, all the ideas, the case studies that have been shared. So yes, like Theodora said, I am focused on taxation. I'm not an education expert. However, as you all know, taxation transcends everything. And at the end of the day, if we're talking about financing development, taxation is the most sustainable form of funding development. So, where are we today in ECOWAS, right? So according to the ECOWAS Monetary Cooperation Program, we are supposed to be generating at least 20% taxation from our GDP. However, as it is today, from statistics from 2018 show that we average about 15% generally. We have countries that are way lower than that, and a few countries that are above that. But averagely, we are doing 15%, which is way below the target set by the ECOWAS Monetary Cooperation Program, which means there is a lot that needs to be done. And if we don't, it means funding development is going to be threatened. So the big question is the current framework for financing education in the ECOWAS countries sustainable? And I guess that is one very big question, particularly with respect to the post-COVID era. How do we go forward? Lessons from COVID-19. How do we ensure that we don't fall into a situation where we have serious problems in terms of financing education? So what is the problem with financing in Africa generally? It is mainly illicit financial flows. According to a report by UNCTAD, a recent report, Africa loses about $89 billion annually to IFFs. And we have three major categories of these IFFs, illicit financial flows. We have the commercial one, the criminal activities, as well as corruption. In terms of the commercial ones, which is the most significant one, where we have the issues of tax evasion, tax avoidance, you have multinational corporations moving money from the ECOWAS region, from Africa to tax havens, depriving us of our revenues that are due to our countries, putting us in a very difficult situation for development. And like I said, the commercial part, which is the tax evasion, tax avoidance, is the most significant. However, there are other issues such as money laundering, terrorism, financing, theft, and bribery. For my talk, I'm going to concentrate on the taxation, the commercial bit of illicit financial flows. So why has it been difficult to address illicit financial flows? Year in, year out, we still get reports. We had reports from the high-level panel a few years ago talking about over $50 billion annually. Now we have a report by UNCTAD saying $89 billion annually. What has been happening? There have been a lot of conversations on how to transform the international tax rules such that it does favor all countries. It does not put developing countries such as our countries in a disadvantaged position. However, as it is still today, we still have, the rules are still complex under what is called, what we call the transfer pricing rules. This, if you're any tax expert here, would be very familiar, but I won't bore you with the technicality. But these are rules that have been set up in a way that it's very difficult for African countries, ECOWAS countries, be able to implement, which means that multinational corporations that contributes the most significant part of our revenues do not pay the necessary taxes they're supposed to pay. We also have secrecy jurisdictions that are still existing. Monies are being easily transferred to these tax havens, depriving us of revenue. And also, generally, we have low capacity in terms of tax administration. A lot of improvement have gone into that. However, there's still a long way to go. Automation, there's also improvement in that area, but still due to the nature of our challenges, there's still a lot of improvement that needs to be made. So what is the implication of these losses and how it's still difficult for us to address these challenges? One example is from the UNCTAD report is that the 89 billion IFFs that has been lost in Africa, it is equal to a combined total of annual inflows of ODAs, official development assistance, and foreign direct investment. You can imagine the quantum of what we're losing and how, interestingly, the countries where these illicit financial flows go to, look at the countries where the same ODA and the same FDI comes from. So it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Also, in terms of education, the implication is that it has been seen that countries with high IFFs invest about 58% less in education than other countries in the continent. And an example of a country where we have high illicit financial flows, particularly in the ECOWAS, is Nigeria. And this is that even from the GFI, the high-level panel reports, you see Nigeria has a significant portion of these IFFs. And generally, what this means is that we have less funding for education in the region. So another problem that we have is tax incentives. Now, what is tax incentive? Tax incentives are sort of the policies, the regulations that we put in place to attract foreign direct investment. So you have, for example, a company income tax of 30% in your country. You say, Coca-Cola, Google, come and invest in my country. If you invest in my country, you don't pay any taxes, or you pay 5% rather than 30%. This is what we call tax incentive. You would notice that I put a slash there, expenditures. So yes, it could be tax incentive or tax expenditures, depending on the context in which it is. We call it tax expenditures because ordinarily, these are taxes that ought to be paid by the taxpayers. So if the government is saying, no, do not pay these taxes, these same taxes that are meant to fund our development, it means we'll have to find other means as a government to fund those aspects of development. So it now becomes like an expense on the part of the government, and that is why it's called tax expenditure. And it's good to look at it as an expenditure because that is the only way you would really understand the implication of granting tax incentives. We've been granting these tax incentives in the ECOWAS region in Africa generally. However, evidence has shown that these incentives are not necessarily important factors for driving foreign direct investment. And I'll share with you a few case studies as we go. Similarly, evidence has also shown that African countries tend to grant more harmful tax incentives. There's what we call profit-based tax incentives as against cost-based incentives. And profit-based incentives are the likes of tax holidays. So come and invest in my country, 5 years, 10 years, don't pay any taxes whatsoever. As against cost-based incentives that says, okay, you invest so and so in your plant or machinery, I'll give you what we call accelerated depreciation so that you're able to recoup the money that you have actually invested, which, I mean, studies have shown that they are less harmful than the likes of tax holidays. But what we've seen is that in Africa, in ECOWAS, we offer more of the profit-based incentive. So what have we found? A study by World Bank, just to buttress the theory that incentives are not necessarily important factors for investment. A World Bank survey found that in East Africa, in a survey of where they got about 147 respondents, 90% of them responded that whether or not they received the incentives, they would have anyway invested in the countries, which means that, I mean, what it means indirectly is that the government just gave away their revenues, because whether or not they give them those incentives, they would have still invested, and which doesn't make any sense, which is, in my point of view, a waste to the government, governments that are struggling with funding development. Similarly, in Uganda, there's a point, I think in 1997, where Uganda eliminated all their incentives. But interestingly, it continued to attract foreign direct investment, as against the notion that once you offer incentives, they will invest, or if you remove incentives, you will discourage FDI. And this was a study done by Osiwa. In Tanzania also, evidence have shown that despite introducing export processing zones, FDI did not necessarily increase, albeit it only increased temporarily in a particular year over a long period of time. ActionAid also did a study where they showed the losses due to tax incentives in Nigeria, Senegal, and Ghana. And these are from very limited data, sort of limited estimates. And this still gave us a sum of about $5.8 billion lost cumulatively from these 3 countries alone. And you can imagine what $5.8 billion can do for these 3 countries. So what should we do to ensure that we have a sustainable framework for financing education, particularly in the post post-COVID era. So generally, there are two recommendations that I'm going to make, two broad recommendations. Is one, to address illicit financial flows, and also to rethink our tax incentives framework. But specifically, what we need to do is strengthen the capacity of our tax administration, improve our tax laws to check areas where there are loopholes, strengthen our source rules. Also, we need to invest in collaborative approaches. We can take a cue from what the African Tax Administration Forum is doing at the OECD and the inclusive framework level, where they sort of galvanize and sort of bring African countries together to try and have a unified voice around the peculiarities of African countries. We can also promote and support simple approaches as against the current very complex and difficult international tax rules that we have. But going forward, in terms of incentive, generally we look at the incentives framework and review our incentive framework. Rethink our incentives framework to see, in terms of cost benefits, what are we getting? Are we getting more or losing or losing more?
Please,
part
we
of our
can
framework.
just round up now, please.
Yes, I'm almost done. So in terms of what we need to do, we ensure that before we develop or grant any tax incentives, there's a cost benefit analysis carried out. We also phase out ineffective and wasteful tax incentives, improve the transparency in generally in public financial management, and also produce and share to the public what it is that we're granting in terms of incentives, the opportunity cost of incentives in terms of development. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your contributions. I mean, like Theodora asked, where is the money? You should direct us in, and you should give us that direction. I guess you have shared more than enough. You have further reaffirmed the fact that Africa is indeed a very rich continent, and the money that we can use to transform our education system actually exists with us. We just need to get creative and get more strategic about locating this money and investing it to transform our education system. We've taken note of all your comments and recommendations. Please let me go on to Dr. Pedi Ano, who is the Regional Coordinator, Education International, African region. Is going to be speaking to us about stakeholders' perspective, safe reopening, resilient education system, and financing education system. I think Mustafa had really shared with us how the financing aspect may go. So if Dr. Pedi can just, give us more insight on how safe it is to reopen schools and what strategies should we be looking at to build a resilient education system in West Africa. Dr. Pedi, you have the floor now. If you can keep it at 4 minutes, that's really going to be good. Dr. Pedi, please, colleagues, kindly drop your questions and comments in the chat box. We are monitoring the box and we are noting the questions to ask the participants immediately after this round. Dr. Pedi, please, you have the floor now. Dr. Pedi, please, are you there? Okay, whilst we are waiting for him, I guess it dropped off. May I just move on to the last speaker? The last speaker is Mr. Sombi Isiaka, who is the PPO Research and Grants for West African Health Organization. WAHO. WAHO is the health agency for ECOWAS. He's going to be speaking to us in the next 4 or 5 minutes on how to ensure safety in our schools in the midst of COVID-19. What are the lessons that we have all learned together as a region, and what are the perspectives we should consider going forward into reopening our schools in a very safe mode. Mr. Sombi, please, if you are there, you have the floor now.
Thank you. I have the floor. Can you share? Let me share.
Okay, yeah. My colleague will let you share your screen. Please keep it at 4 or 5 minutes, please. Thank you so much.
I will try.
All right, I know. And please, en français.
Oui, je vais parler en français, mais je vais présenter... Oui, oui, je vais parler un peu en français, mais je vais présenter mes slides en anglais. Mais je vais aller aussi rapidement parce que j'avais préparé pour 10 minutes, mais je vais pouvoir le faire en 5 minutes. Alors, en tant qu'institution régionale, l'OAS, on nous a demandé de parler un peu de comment garantir la sécurité dans les écoles dans le cadre donc de la COVID-19. J'avais fait une présentation où je voulais vous présenter mon institution, mais je vais aller très vite. Donc, l'OAS, comme vous l'avez dit, c'est l'institution régionale de santé qui est née de la fusion de 2 institutions, une francophone qui avait de l'expérience dans la lutte contre les grandes endémies et une anglophone qui était spécialisée dans la formation des agents de santé. L'objectif de l'institution, c'est d'aider à offrir des services de santé de qualité à travers l'harmonisation des politiques, la mise en commun des ressources et la coopération entre pays. Nous sommes actuellement focalisés sur 5 grands domaines, dont la prévention et le contrôle des maladies à potentiel épidémique et non épidémique. Au tout début de l'épidémie, l'OAS a été une institution qui a été très prévoyante en organisant une première réunion des ministres de la Santé le 15 février pour déjà voir comment notre région devrait travailler. Et il nous a été recommandé d'améliorer la coordination. Et très vite, il y a eu la réunion des chefs d'État de la CEDEAO qui a mis en place des groupes techniques, dont le groupe de la santé, et qui a pu faire au moins 3 réunions ministérielles pour réfléchir et donner des orientations au pays. L'OAS, en tant qu'institution régionale, a été commis de coordonner les activités. Nous avons organisé plusieurs réunions de coordination. Nous avons mis en place un système pour des achats groupés et le partager au niveau des pays pour que les pays puissent avoir le matériel. Nous avons mis également un système pour faire la formation des agents de santé en ligne en organisant plus de 35 formations en ligne avec plus de 3000 agents formés. Et aujourd'hui, nous monitorons régulièrement donc la situation donc de la pandémie. Si vous regardez ici, le 27 octobre, notre région avait 188 172 cas de COVID diagnostiqués, dont malheureusement nous avons perdu 2743 qui étaient infectés et quand même 93% ont pu recouvrir la santé. L'évolution de l'épidémie nous montre qu'actuellement nous sommes dans une pente descendante dans notre région, mais qui nous demande d'être très prudents parce que actuellement, depuis la 30e semaine, nous sommes dans une période de plateau. Et cela est très important. Si nous restons dans cette situation, les écoles pourront être ouvertes sans problème. Mais si on ne fait pas attention et que nous allons faire la deuxième phase, ça va nous poser des problèmes. Alors, que font les pays? Je vais passer rapidement. Les pays ont mis en place plusieurs systèmes qui permettent la coordination, l'éducation, la surveillance, la gestion des cas, mais également la prévention et le contrôle, le développement des laboratoires pour faciliter le dépistage et les activités au niveau des points d'entrée pour faciliter. Et nous avons des mesures non pharmaceutiques qui est justement, c'est dans ces mesures que la fermeture des écoles était un élément important. Que savons-nous aujourd'hui en termes d'évidence sur le Covid et la fermeture des écoles? On sait qu'aujourd'hui, toutes les évidences ont montré que fermer les écoles a été une stratégie qui a permis de réduire la propagation donc, de l'épidémie. Aujourd'hui aussi, on sait que les enfants sont moins à risque et que les enfants transmettent moins le Covid comparé aux adultes, ce qui fait qu'on peut ouvrir les écoles, mais avec un certain nombre de mesures de garde. On sait également que l'ouverture des écoles peut être à risque, parce qu'en Israël, l'ouverture des écoles a montré une épidémie donc, de Covid. Mais qu'est-ce qu'on a noté? Et ça, c'est ce qui est très important. Ce n'est pas l'école, mais c'est parce qu'on n'a pas mis en place le système pour permettre la distanciation sociale, la distanciation physique. Et la conclusion de l'étude a été que la meilleure approche, si nous voulons continuer à voir les écoles, c'est qu'il faut qu'on continue à porter les masques, qu'on continue à respecter la distanciation physique. Il est également important que nous insistons sur les 3 éléments clés, qui est qu'il faut éviter des espaces fermés, moins ventilés, il faut des classes de cours bien aérées, il faut également des lieux, il faut éviter les lieux très fréquentés, donc il faut réduire le nombre d'élèves et il faudra également éviter les éléments trop fermés et moins aérés. Et aujourd'hui, les études nous ont montré que l'ouverture des écoles ne va pas être associée à une augmentation de la transmission si toutes les mesures sont mises en place. C'est pourquoi aujourd'hui, on a tous les guides qui existent, pour permettre une bonne organisation de l'ouverture des écoles. Et ces guides donnent les orientations aux éducateurs, donnent les orientations aux responsables des écoles pour ouvrir des écoles. Et ce qui est intéressant, les leçons apprises, ça veut dire quoi? Actuellement, la situation de la pandémie dans nos pays est encore sous contrôle. Mais nous devons être vigilants, très vigilants au vu de ce qui se passe en Europe, au vu de ce qui se passe en Amérique. Si nous maintenons nos mesures barrières, si nous maintenons les mesures de distanciation sociale, on peut maintenir notre épidémie à un niveau acceptable qui nous permettra d'ouvrir nos écoles. On peut ouvrir les écoles en respectant les mesures. Il y a des bonnes expériences qui existent, des guides existent, et si tous ces éléments sont mis en œuvre, nous pensons que nous pouvons repartir dans nos écoles avec des formations en respectant les mesures. Alors, dans les perspectives, nous devons continuer le monitoring. C'est très important. Si on ouvre les écoles, on doit continuer à monitorer. On doit continuer à apprendre, à voir les faiblesses, à organiser, à en améliorer. On doit continuer la communication sur le risque pour améliorer les capacités des populations à comprendre, à eux-mêmes s'engager. Et c'est ce que nous vous proposons. Je vous remercie pour l'attention. Merci.
Thank you so much. Merci beaucoup, monsieur. I think at this point, I would like to appreciate all the speakers once again for the insightful comments they have made, and as well as the recommendations that accompanied all their submissions. Let me quickly go to the chat box and take some of the questions that we have. I think we have approximately 30 minutes to go. So I think the first question I have here is from it's from, I can't pick his name. No, I think Zach actually made this comment. It says that thus far, and this is being directed to Honorable Minister, it says, thus far, and based on your experience, what policies and strategies have worked or would work in leapfrogging inequality in education post-COVID? So what works and what will work to recover lost learning and minimize drop out of schools for girls, and also enhance access to and affordability of digital e-learning platform? This is to His Excellency. His Excellency and Honorable Deputy Minister, if you can just take note of that questions, I will try to read others. And from Ibrahim Salia Adamu, he says, I was wondering if Ministry of Education had done any monitoring to schools that are currently reopened. That is for SS2 and JS2. What lessons are we learning from these schools, and how is that influencing our strategy for final reopening of school? I think this is also to Honorable Minister. What strategies are we putting in place to reopen schools finally, and what lessons have we learned in monitoring schools, sections of our schools that are already opened? The next question is from Dokurugu Wumbe, also to Honorable Minister, and it says, what policies will you want ECOWAS as a sub-regional body to consider to make education in the region resilient and robust to withstand future emergency? I believe in the last 5 years, the region has witnessed huge pandemic. We had Ebola, and then we have COVID. So, Honorable Minister, what policy will you want ECOWAS as a sub-regional body to consider to make?
Let me add one more question for Honorable.
Okay.
So I have one more question here. Based on your experience, Honorable, in schools reopening, what works or would work to leapfrog inequality from post-COVID? I think you mentioned leapfrogging. So what works to recover from lost learning from the poor, minimizing dropouts of schools, especially for the girls? From your experience, what will work, and how will we leapfrog, and how will we minimize school dropouts, especially for girls?
All right, thank you so much, Theodora. I thought I went through that questions, but maybe I missed it. Okay. Another question to Honorable is, it would be nice to know if Ghana's Ministry of Education, based on reopening policy and decision on evidence, and if teachers have been involved in the decisions and policy processes. So it's basically saying that, what are the policy decisions that have been made? Were they made based on evidences, and have we involved teachers in the process? A question to Rukia too. I think we have like 4 questions to Honorable Minister. So Rukiatu, if you are listening, please take down this question. In part of Burkina, okay, this is from Zaki to Rukiatu, Zakaria to Rukiatu. People cannot go to school due to activities of extremist groups. What can be done to ensure learning resumes for these children in conflict-affected area? So Rukiatu, because you are on the ground, what do you think can be done to, re-engage children in these conflict zones back into education? So I'm going to invite my colleague John to read out other questions. John, are you there? John, are you there? Okay. Another question I have here is from Dokurugu. This is to all the panelists. Do you agree that we need to leverage on the telecoms to build strong tech infrastructure in deprived communities to allow digital transformation in the education system across member countries? I think Cecil talked a lot about this, and I will want someone, not Cecil, maybe Prosper, from looking at it from UNESCO's point of view, you may want to take on that questions, Prosper. So the next question says, what IT agenda is ECOWAS currently pursuing that can be leveraged for a regional IT transformation for education? If Mrs. Aisha is still in the room, I would actually like you to take on this question. If there is something ECOWAS is currently doing within the IT framework, information technology framework that countries could leverage on, that would be really interesting to hear. So I think let's take this one. I would like to start with Honorable Minister. Yes, please. Hold on. I'll call on you, please. Okay. Just mute your mics. Honorable Minister, if you are ready for us, you have 4 questions. We'd like to hear from you. Thank you, sir.
I think they gave me all the questions.
This is
okay. I will speak briefly on the telecoms issue. You see, in Ghana, the accessibility to the various services by telecoms was actually spearheaded by the companies. So you may go to a place where there's sparse population and they will not go and build their masts and other things there because they figure that may not be viable financially. So what the government has now decided to do is to spearhead the installation of all the telecom accessibility devices possible so that the telecoms will just move in without making that initial capital investment. So with that, I think we are going to really speed up and accessibility to various telecom services, especially to cell phones across the country, because the telecoms don't have to do their own feasibility to see, do we build here or don't build here, would we make money or won't make money with the initial capital investment. So I think that's a huge step forward in terms of reducing the digital divide, especially between geographical areas. So that is what I was saying. And when you move on with the telecom issues, I think what my colleagues said about zero rating by telecom companies for university students was a big thing in Ghana during the time that universities had to go online. Because when they zero rated, then students would go on their credit or their data was not being used. And as a result, it was a big, big help for them to access the learning management portals. I think there was another thing about ECOWAS and what we need to do. Yes. One thing I would recommend that we do immediately is about sharing of best practices. Like we are doing some kind of that here. You see, various countries are doing different things and every one of them is doing something unique. So if we share that best practice and have a best practices transformation guidebook, you're going to see that the best practice in Ghana can then be replicated by Nigeria. Ghana can also replicate Nigerian best practices, learn from Ivory Coast, learn from these countries. At the time you realize we have the experiences here in West Africa to really bring about the transformation that we need. Everybody's doing their own thing. We don't get to know much about what everybody is doing. As a result, most of the time we are looking to the West. And what we may not realize is that we are doing different things, best practices here and there. So the first thing I recommend is, can we get the best practices handbook? Something that will tell us the story of Ivory Coast, how they did accessibility, how Ghana did quality, what are we doing in relevance of education system. I think that is the first step towards really coming out of COVID-19 stronger than before in terms of what we need to do. There was something about what works as we did in Ghana. I think the first thing we need to do is to accept the fact that learning poverty existed before COVID-19. But the situation has been exacerbated. And given the fact that it has been worse than what it used to be, what do you do? And you cannot do this policy just at the macro, big picture level without looking at how can I help a student to really learn and do well. And I think my colleague, one of my colleagues talks about the fact that we need to begin to look at how do we customize learning for a student. How do you know that these students are learning best and they have difficulty here? And I think we now have to seriously look at infusion of artificial intelligence in the teaching and learning space so that we are not shooting through the dark. It's not that expensive. Student can do an assessment and you'll be able to know that in this class, a majority of the students don't know how to do this, and therefore I need to focus on that. So I think equipping our teachers with basic tools in that area. Are there some websites where teachers can use for assessment, even using their smartphones? And what would that do for them in terms of a huge database that can then be created? In some countries, some variations of that is being done. And once again, I think it's also about sharing. And dropouts, big issue, especially in rural communities. Ghana is tackling that. We have the complementary education program that is bringing students who have dropped out back to school, but we've created incentive programs, and that effort is being led by NGOs, not by the Ministry of Education. or the Ghana Education Service. And it's outcome-based. You get paid initially, you are going to be paid more when all the students transition into a regular public school system. You get paid outcome-based, and NGOs are very happy to have that. But we're also happy to know that it's not just paying you, you get most of your money coming to you based on outcomes. So the outcome-based funding system that we are implementing is something that I believe other countries can take a look at and say, 400,000 students on the street, NGOs that come on board, you have $50,000 paid to you in advance. When it's all said and the students are transitioning, other payment is coming to you. And it's a win-win for the NGOs, a win-win for the school system. And I cannot emphasize the more parent participation, whether tangential in terms of having an impact on policymaking, or infused in terms of having an impact at the school level. Parent participation is so important. Invariably in Africa, we minimize that. We seem to think that the uneducated parents have no space in the school. But what we don't understand is that the uneducated parents invariably look at school as a ticket out of poverty. And once you equip them, they are more likely to participate, even better than the so-called educated. But somehow we say to ourselves, we don't need you. And the mom who is uneducated says, I don't even feel comfortable coming into your space. But we need to be able to engage all these parents for them to begin to understand what you didn't get, your child will get that. And we are here to work with you. Partner with us. Make sure they come to school. And we are here together to help change the fortunes of your child. And invariably in this community, most parents, when you educate them well, know that their children are their social security insurance and everything. And therefore, they are more likely to work with you. But we minimize that and do not benefit from parent participation, which in many places is the panacea to student achievement and dropouts are issues that we confront every day. I think in terms of Ghana, what we have done, a progressive opening of schools, the lessons learned. We have to make sure that when schools open for all schools in January, we need to make sure we distribute all the protocols, whether it's nose masks, it has to go a week in advance, for example, so that you leave no room for a school to open and they don't have the face mask, they don't have their sanitizers. And also teacher training. We learned the hard way. When we began, the first time we did our progressive opening, teachers were not trained, the headmasters were trained, and we were hoping that they would pass it on, but there was a problem. So now we have to make sure all teachers are trained, and not just train the headmasters and think that the teaching will be done. But one good thing that I saw in Ghana in terms of best practice is how the president directly got involved in the whole school opening thing. He did not leave it to the Ministry of Education. Now I tease him and say that he's the Minister for Education. The president made sure that he met with unions and other civil society organizations, association of headmasters and head teachers, and directly dialogue with them. So it wasn't like the minister met with them and informed the president. He said, no, this is something that he personally had to be involved in, and he met with them to look at what can be changed. And there are some things that changed after our meetings with them when we met the president. And the union felt appreciated that the president was interested in making sure that they were safe. So I think that's the best practice, that the highest level of government should get involved in the whole process and don't just use the traditional Minister for Education, do it, and let's get it done. I think this is what I captured.
Thank you so much, Honorable Minister, Dr. Yeo. Thank you so much for your comment. Rukiat, I noticed that you have provided a lot of responses to your questions right in the chat box. Please, may I just encourage colleagues to read the chat box for some of the responses that have been provided there. One of the points you raised is that, yes, indeed, there are many students out of schools in Burkina Faso, and government is yet to make, no, you said government have made some provisions, but you doubt if these provisions can adequately address this problem. They need to get more innovative in their solution. And another person also said that technology in education is certainly important, but it must be supported by strong policy. And I really love the fact that Cecile tried to put everything out there for us with regards to some kind of policies we should be considering in the course of reopening our educational system into an advanced level. Another point that was raised, I think, by Isofu Kumo is that yes, schools have been closed and teachers are also at home due to insecurity. And it's important for me to reiterate here that the kind of insecurity we are talking about for Burkina Faso actually cuts across all the countries in the Sahel region of sub-Saharan Africa. Very close to us here will include Burkina Faso, Niger, Chad, Mali, northern Nigeria. So all this, these areas are quite affected due to the activities of terrorists as we have them. Another point that was raised is that, okay, I think I may have covered most of them. So Prosper, the last question for you, we are already 2 minutes beyond our schedule, but please, may I crave your indulgence for additional 10 minutes just so we can round up this conversation. We know how difficult it is to have this kind of webinar in 2 hours. But Prosper, we have a question. And I wanted to know the position of Unesco on this e-learning platforms. What are we doing about it? How are we engaging governments to adopt this, and what kind of support, if any at all, are we providing to governments to actually take education, learning to digital platforms?
Yeah, thank you, Omobi. Yeah, what UNESCO has been doing from the start of COVID is to launch what we call the Global Education Coalition. We noticed that the cost is involved in the COVID response was going to be huge, especially because of the digitization agenda. And we also noticed that governments were going to focus more on the health issues, how to ensure the citizens are healthy. So UNESCO launched the Global Education Coalition as an initiative to mobilize resources from the private sector. And so far, the response has been great. Telcos have signed up. As we speak now, we have Huawei has signed up. We have Google has signed up. A lot of huge multinationals are signing up to be part of the Global Education Coalition so that they contribute to supporting the member states of UNESCO in addressing the issue of the digital divide. So it's a better solution because we know the governments are under stress, the budgets are overstretched because of COVID. So if we want to, we are expecting governments to increase their budgetary allocation at this stage. It will not be realistic. And last week, UNESCO organized global education meeting again. UNESCO, the government of Ghana, the government of UK, and the Norway. Again, bringing the global community together to agree on how to ensure that education budgets are not going to decline. There is a declaration which is also online now, you can access it. There is a commitment by global leaders to ensure that at least 4 to 6% of GDPs are allocated to support education, and 15 to 20% of their national budget. So this initiative, we think this is the way to go. Private sector's role in ensuring that infrastructure goes to the remotest part is important, but we can't do it by using, we can't force them, as Dr. Aduchum said, they target areas that they can make profits. So UNESCO is using this strategy to let them feel good that they are contributing to solutions that are relevant to society, and they are eager to do it by joining a coalition like this. And actually, a lot of them are rushing to sign up so that they get recognized globally that they are part of this coalition and they are contributing to society. So Ghana, for instance, so far we've had about 6 organizations pledging to come and support the government when schools reopen to ensure that the digitized agenda of government becomes a reality. So I think a lot of governments are also going to benefit, not only Ghana. So people should look out for that. Global Education Coalition, they can Google it and they see how widespread it is, how organizations are signing up to address the issue of digitization in the education sector. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prosper. I think what is most interesting in your comment is the fact that there is already a thinking around this and some actions have been taken by UNESCO. I think it's maybe important for our government to foster this kind of private-public, partnership around digitalizing our education system. I think one more comment, Tairu Traore says that ECOWAS leadership needs to really consider ICT in all our educational policies. It's very important, and this is to all 15 members of ECOWAS states. ICT needs to be a concrete, an integral part of our education policy. And Momo Bangura also says that to have a regional policy on non-discrimination of pregnant girls in the normal school learning system, as those girls should be seen as victims. Okay, it's a recommendation that we should have a regional policy that talks about non-discrimination of pregnant girls. There have been instances where pregnant girls have been denied, readmission into school, whilst their male counterpart who literally, was part and parcel of the act are allowed to go on with their education. So we need to look at that aspect. Well, thank you so much for all the submissions. Like I said, time is never enough for us to, finish, issues around education, which particularly how it interconnects COVID. A number of points that have been made just as a way of, rounding up before I call on Theodora if she's there, is that, yes, we have been doing a lot. COVID was definitely something we all didn't expect. It was a shocker for the world. And then Africa was caught in a very bad side because we were not so, we hadn't had our education system highly integrated with technology. So that was a major problem. Quite a number of students went out of school completely. And of course, for those who were able to continue learning online, it shows the gap between, it's widening the inequality gap between the rich and the poor in our society. Thus, there is a lot of comments on government bridging this gap by actually integrating technology into our education system. And thanks to Cicero, I can't just leave past all the points you made, so passionately during your presentation. Prosper talked about special program for the vulnerable that they're working on, and also call on multi-sectoral collaboration between and among ministries and other stakeholders working within the education sector. Rukiatu shared with us some of the challenges they are facing or they faced in Burkina Faso, like I said, which is very common to the Sahel region of the continent. And she made an emphatic request that the education system should be reformed and we should integrate digital tools and get ourselves prepared for the next pandemic today. She talked about digital library and redefining our education system to meet contemporary 21st century, to be more competitive generally. And Cecile talked a lot about the need for us to incorporate technology into our education. And of course, most importantly, partnering with the telcos who already have the infrastructure to help us in reaching the hard-to-reach environment, especially in the, local communities, the interiors where telephones and mobile networks have already penetrated. We should begin to latch, on this, opportunities. And this is a collaboration she's calling on government to make immediately. And Mustafa also talked to us about, e-learning and the financing of it. He talked to us about the need for collaboration as well for rural communities, illicit financial flow. I mean, a lot of points have been raised. I don't want to rush through them. There was a question, I believe Honorable Minister already talked around it, and the person was asking, how are we curtailing pandemic in boarding schools? I think he talked about it. And our colleague also showed us where to get the money. He talked about illicit financial flow. He talked about the need to strengthen our tax systems, review the tax regime where necessary, have a cost-benefit analysis of the tax rebate we are giving to especially our international partners, and also look at our public financial management generally. So a lot have been said, and I still believe that there are yet many things unsaid. But for today, this is how much we can cover. What is important is that we have been able to start this conversation, but it's not going to end here. We're going to put together all these recommendations and categorize them. The one meant for ECOWAS, the one meant for WAO, meant for policymakers, whom our Honorable Minister here is representing across the region. We're going to put it together. And as well, the ones that are meant for us as civil society, what we should be doing to ensure safe reopening of our schools in a post-pandemic era. We're going to take on all of them. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Let me invite Theodora if you're here.
Yeah, I'm
fantastic.
Here.
I know internet has dealt with you today.
I'm here, and I think my best is from the Honorable Minister, where he says we should have a catalog of best practices across the region. I think that's what we are trying to do. And so he should be rest assured we'll come back to him for that proposal. And that will come, and we'll see how we can work together to put together that kind of guide, best practices for all countries to share and put together. We'll have the best West African country. And so I think in closing, we were supposed to do some kind of recommendations from our panelists, and that has been done. We have picked out their key recommendations. In case something is left out, they could please still reach out to us so we can include it in our policy brief and to share. And then I would like to say thank you to Oxfam for believing in this dream and supporting us to live it. And thank you also to our Honorable Minister. I think he's one of the best ministers. Whenever anybody hears that he's coming or he will be on the program, they're like, oh no, he will be there. Don't worry, he'll be on time. Nobody doubted that he won't be around. It's amazing. Honorable Minister, if you are listening, you're an amazing minister and we love you. And you are really representing West Africa, and your comments have been taken on board. We hope to work with it, and we will bring it back to you to work on it. And then our panelists, over 6 panelists, have been amazing. Unfortunately, Dr. Anawi from the Education International, I think dropped off. He was supposed to talk to us from the teacher's point of view. We heard about the need to train teachers even in this pandemic so they return to the classroom better and more equipped with capacity. Unfortunately, he dropped off, and we hope I think he shared his PowerPoint with us so we can still include his inputs in our policy document. And so to the rest, Mustafa, Cecil, Rokiatu, Prosper, I disturb Prosper a lot. Yes, Prosper, and to all of you, we say a big thank you. We know how busy you are and how this virtual world is following you everywhere you go, even your bedrooms. We are coming to you with virtual meetings. Forgive us, and thank you for coming on board. We really acknowledge that you've taken time to be here. and share your perspective and input. And I think we are going to have a better West Africa if we're able to put all this in place. Thank you to ANCEFA as well. They've been supportive, and all the NGOs, especially also WACSI, and WACSI, Omolara, and her team. You've been great, and we really acknowledge your support and making this happen. And to everybody, the Oxfam team, the FOSDA team, the NORSAC team, YEFL team, everybody, and the YEG team. We are grateful we made this happen, and we are going to use everything that came out of it to influence education policy across West Africa. So Omo, thank you, and over to you for closing.
Okay, thank you so much, FOSDA. It's Theodora. It's been an amazing experience for us to be part of this conversation. We as WACSI have, started looking at the different aspects of COVID in our everyday life, not only as civil society, but of course as a society generally. We've looked at COVID and its impact on elections, its impact on civic space, its impact on, sustainability of civil society, financing, donor support, and it's really, a plus for us that we are able to participate and, actually partner with FOSDA and other organizations in looking at its impact on our education system. So thank you so much, FOSDA, Oxfam, ANCEFA, WAHO, UNESCO, and Ecampus for making this webinar a success for us. Like we said, this is the beginning of the conversation. We will be coming your way again, not only with the policy brief that will come out of this conversation, but of course, as other issues unfold, we will call on you again to help trash them out with your knowledge, experiences, and of course, creative insight. Until we come your way.
Let me say thank you to ECOWAS as well. They were the first people we approached with the idea, and they encouraged us. They said it's a good idea, and they had similar initiatives coming up. And so they encouraged us, even though they were so busy. Aisha was always with us whenever we contacted her, and she helped us a lot. She recommended that we get to Ghana, and some of the partners we invited were recommended by ECOWAS. So thank you.
Excellent.
Sorry, Theodora, because you have mentioned that. Just a sec. Sorry.
Yes, please go on.
Oh, yes, thank you. Sorry, I think
from ANCEFA.
It is important actually to also indicate that besides the national education coalitions from the ECOWAS region that attended, we had other coalitions from outside of the region, including I have seen actually one from the coordinator of Angola has been here throughout. So we really appreciate them. It is important that we keep sharing some of these issues, because I think the experiences we get from one country or the other are very similar. But again, as the Honorable Minister did point out, I think when we eventually have this book of best practices, it would be good to have it cut across all the regions of Africa. Otherwise, I thank you very, very much. There's one thing which you must, you must just include it in those recommendations. We need to have a campaign to get all our children, all our learners back to school. The countries that are reopening, they are actually indicating that a number of our girls are not getting back. A number of those children with disability, they are not getting back. So I just thought that it would be important to have that also included. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Boaz. I think this is interesting, and I think the campaign that you have just raised is in order. It is expected, and then we ought to have been more proactive in responding to this. So I think it's better late than never, and I'm happy that all the key stakeholders from UNESCO to Oxfam to ANCEFA and Honorable Minister as well, we are all here. So this is a call to action for every one of us to find a way to bring our girls and all the abled differently back to school. Again, thanks a lot. We are exactly 20 minutes beyond our schedule. We need to close it down here because I know many of us have other engagement for 2 p.m. This is 2:20. So if you permit us, we would like to say goodbye. See you later because we will be coming your way again. Thank you so much, Honorable Minister Dr. Yor Adutum, for being part of this conversation from beginning to the end. Yao, okay, Yao, thank you. Yao Adutum for being part of this conversation. Just to add my voice to that of Theodora, it is really rare to see a minister sit in this kind of, be it a physical or virtual meeting, to sit in for 2 hours, 2.5 hours. So we really appreciate you. You're really rare among others. So we thank you so much. Until then, we're going to share the recording with you. We're going to put the presentations together and share with all of you. If you have any comment or one last recommendation you forgot to make or type down, just send it to us in a mail. In another week, we should have the policy brief ready, and then we should be able to share with you. So if you have something to share with us, please do share with us now. Thanks to all Oxfam, WAF, and YEG. I saw somebody from, I think somewhere, Spain or something, one of the European countries, of Denmark. Thank you so much for joining from far. This was actually a global meeting. Thanks a lot. Have a good afternoon. Goodbye for now.